Welcome to Project-Based Python. These tutorials will not cover Python basics in depth. If you need help with the basics, you can try PyLearning Companion. It is a Python study app that covers all the core concepts in short lessons, then tests your skills with hundreds of activities. PyLearning Companion is available on Android and iOS. You can find the links in the video description. Today we will extend our previous project. We will add a Graphical User Interface, or GUI, to our username and password program. We will use tkinter to accomplish this. I would strongly recommend you watch the username and password video before going through with this lesson. You can find the link in the video description. Let's get started. The first thing we need to do is copy and paste the code from the username and password project. So let me just do that here. And you'll notice that this is exactly the same as what we had in the previous video. The only small difference is that I've added this else statement here. In the previous video, if all of these statements prove to be true, and then the username does not fall between 2 and 15 characters, we simply just went back to the enter your username. So I forgot to include this else statement. The else statement is in the GitHub repository, but it is not in the previous video. Other than that, everything else should look the same. Now let's start making some changes. So first, we are going to import tkinter. We're not going to import it the same way as we imported string. We will say from tkinter import star. So this will import all of the functions from tkinter and let us use them without having to type in tkinter.function. So we can just access the functions on their own. The next thing we need to do is move all of this code here. So everything needs to be inside of another function. So we're going to call this function click. And like I said, we will just tab in all of this code. So everything that we have here will now be executed when we call this function. And this will make sense in a minute. So before we move on to creating the tkinter window, let's just handle these little issues. Now, all of these things that are underlined because of PEP 8, so it is just standard Python conventions. We don't need to have two lines between between functions inside of a function. So let's just make sure that we only have one. And now we can move on to creating the tkinter window. We are going to do that after the click function. So down here, we will start by first creating the window. So we will say window equals tk and open and close parentheses. So the window will be an instance of tkinter. And next, we need to configure the window. So we will say window.title, and let's pass in the string create an account, because that's what we're doing with this code. And finally, for the window, we will say window.configure, and this will allow us to change the background color. It would allow us to change the dimensions and different things, but we're going to make a simple window. It will not be the prettiest thing you've ever seen, but it'll be functional. So we're just going to create the background color, and we will set it to gray. Let's create the first label for our window now. So label, open and close parentheses, and we are first going to say where we want the label to appear. So window, then we will pass in some text, and we'll say enter your username. Then we will set the background to equal gray. We want it to be the same as the window so that the label looks a little bit nicer. We will set the foreground to be white, so this will affect our font. Then we need to set the font, and we can just say none to use the default font of size 12, and we will make it bold. Now we need to place our label, and we are going to use the grid function. The grid function allows us a little bit more control. There's an easier and faster way to do this with the pack function, but we're not going to cover that right now. So using the grid function, we need to pass in some information to tell Python where to put this label. So we will say row equals 1, column equals 0, sticky equals east-west, and we will pad y equals 8. So that will give us a little bit of padding at the top and the bottom. Also notice that we're going over this magic line here. This is something we should avoid to make our code a little bit more readable. So I will just hit enter here, and this will still continue as one line, but it will be written on 2 lines. And you will see how this grid works in just 1 second. I'm going to add 2 more labels, and then we can see it in action. So I will just copy this, and I'll paste it in. We need to just make sure that the labels say something different. So here we'll have enter your password. And we will also perform a password check to see if the passwords match. So we will ask the user to confirm the password. So confirm password. All right, and now we can actually run this to see what it looks like. To make Python create this window, we need to say window.main loop, and we need to have the parentheses here. So if we run it now, here's our window. It says confirm password, and I just realized why. So we never actually changed the grid for the other labels. So right now they're all on top of each other. So let's just change the rows to 3 and 5. The reason why I'm not typing in 1, 2, 3 is because we're going to add some other things between these labels. We're going to add some text input fields. So for now, the only rows that exist are 1, 3, and 5, and because 2 and 4 are not there, Python will just place them one below the other, so it will just ignore 2 and 4. Now if we run this, we have all 3 of our labels. They have some padding at the top and the bottom. They're all centered, they're white in color, they use bold font, and you can see that the background matches the window background, so it looks a little bit nicer. I know that this isn't the prettiest graphic user interface, but we are just creating something simple to make it work for now. Now let's create some of those entry fields that we need. So we need one for the username, one for the password, and then a second one for the password so that we can compare the two. The first thing that we need to do is create a variable for this. So we will say username box equals entry and open and close parentheses. Notice this is a little bit different than how we created labels. So these labels don't actually have a variable associated with them. That means that we can't reference them. We can't make any changes to them later. For the boxes that we're creating, we need to be able to make changes because we're going to have the user type some information in. So that's why we have a variable that contains the entry. For the entry, we are going to pass in some information here. So we'll say window, that's where it's going to be placed. Then we are going to give it a width of 40, and we're going to give it a background color, so we'll set that to white. Now we need to place the username box, so username box.grid, and this is kind of the same thing. It's just that here we can do it in one line because we're never actually creating a variable, but because we have a variable here, we can just call username box.grid, so we can call that function to place it where we want. So we'll just say row equals 2 and column equals 0. Let's just quickly look at it. There it is. So this is a text entry box that we can use. Now let's make 2 more entry boxes for the passwords. So I'll just copy and paste these, and let me rename them. So we'll call the first one PW box, and this one will be PW confirm box. So the second one will have another input for the user to confirm their password. We need to change the rows, so this one will be 4 and this one will be 6. And now if we run it, we will get 3 different entry fields. So this one will be for the username, password, and to confirm the password. Now let's add a button here, and we are not going to use a variable because we will not be making any changes to this button. So we'll just say button, and it needs to go inside of our window. We will set the text of the button to say submit. We will create a width and set it to 6. And then we are going to have a command. Now the command will equal click. And if you go back up here, you can see that that is the name of our function. We don't want to use parentheses at the end of click, because right now, if we had parentheses after the click, as soon as the button is created, the click function would get executed, and this is a problem. We want tkinter to wait for us to actually click on the button and then execute whatever the function does. And then we need to place this. We will use row 7, and column will still be 0, and then we'll add some padding. Let's make it 10. So let's run this just to see what it looks like. And there is our submit button. I will not click on it right now because the function is not ready yet. We need to make some changes before this is functional. The clicking on it right now would crash the program. Before we make any changes to the click function, let's just add one more label. So we'll call this one output, and it will be a label in our window. The text will be nothing for now. The background will be gray. The foreground will be white. The font will be none and 12. We are not going to make this one bold. And then we'll set the width to 60. Let's then add it to our grid. And we will use row 8, column 0, sticky east-west, and padding will be 10. I didn't explain the sticky earlier, so sticky can allows us to move the label around in our window. Passing in east and west will center it horizontally. Let's have a look. And first let me add some text here so we can see it. So hi there. If I run this, we can see the output here. It says hi there. We will be changing this output depending on what the issue is, but we will start with a blank output so that there is nothing down here. Now we will get rid of this hi there. We don't want there to be a message initially. And let's go inside of our click function and make some changes now. So first we need to add a couple of variables. So we will add one called username, and we'll set that to username box.get. So this will assign a value to username by going into our tkinter window, going into the username box, and getting the value that is in that box. So we're setting the username to whatever the user has typed in. Then the password will be pwbox.get. And then the confirmed password will be pwconfirmbox.get. So this will just get 3 different values from the 3 entry boxes that we have in our window. So the username will be here, the first password, and the second password. Now we can start performing the checks on the username and password. So let's go down here. And let's set our output. So output.configure text equals, we'll set it to sign up successful. So this is our goal. We're going to work through it backwards. We will have the output equals sign up successful, then go through a series of if statements and change the text if something is wrong. Let's start with just checking the length of the username. So if len username is less than 3 or len username is greater than 14. This looks a little bit different from what we had down here because we're kind of doing the opposite of each one of these. Here we're checking that the username falls between 2 and 15 characters. Here we're actually checking to see that it does not. So if it doesn't, we will tell the user, hey, you need to make sure that the username is at least 3 characters long or at most 14. So we will change the value, the output value. We will change the text to equal username must be between 3 and 14 characters long. And I will comment out the while loop here because this would cause a crash. And we can already test this, so let's try it. If I just submit it, we get username must be between 3 and 14 characters long. And if we have a short username, we get the same message. Then if we say let's say Albert, we will get to sign up successful. Now we don't want that, we want to perform more checks, but we can see that everything works as it should. Now let's add some more checks. So let's get rid of this. And we want to perform the next check between this output and this if statement. This should actually be the last one. So remember, we're doing everything backwards. So now we're going to say if not, or actually if not, name available. And remember, here we were checking if name available. Here we're doing the opposite. So if the name is not available, we change the output to something to tell the user that the name is not available. So if name not available, then we need to pass in the username. We will change the output. So text equals, please choose another username. Let's test this one out. So in our list, we can see that the names are Sam, Frank, and Jane. So let's go to Jane. And if I submit it, we get please choose another username. And now we just continue with the if statement. So the next one should check whether or not the username has any numbers in it. Remember, we don't want numbers in the username. So if number found, we pass in the username. We will change the output again. We will set it to say username cannot contain numbers. And let's add a few more if statements and then we'll test it again because this should work as expected. So the next one will be to check the length of the password. So if len password is less than 8, remember the password needs to be at least 8 characters long. We will change the text again. So text equals password must be at least 8 characters long. All right, and now we can test it one more time. So here, let's just use a name like Frankie. And now the password, we'll type in pass. If we submit it, we get password must be at least 8 characters long. Now if we add a number to Frankie, we go back to username cannot contain numbers. Now let's check for capital letters in the password. So if not caps found, we pass in the password. Output.configure text equals password must contain a capital letter. All right, and this should say capital letter. Now let's add another if statement. This one will check if we have special characters. So if not special found, password, output.configure text equals password must contain a special character, and then we'll tell the user what the special characters are. So here we go. And let's also make sure that I know how to spell capital. Now let's test this. So we will say Tim, and now let's test the numbers or the capital letters in the password. So pass, and oh, we need to make sure that it's at least 8 characters long, so we'll just say pass. Here we go. Password must contain special characters. If I remove the capital letter, we get password must contain a capital letter. And now all we have to do is just check for a number in the password and then make sure that the passwords match, and we're done. So if not number found, password, output.configure text equals password must contain a number. And one last one, if password doesn't equal confirm password and length of the passwords is greater than 7. So remember, the password needs to be at least 8 characters long, so that's why I'm using 7 here. But I want to make sure that there is something entered in those fields. Otherwise, password and confirm password are going to be identical because they both start off as blanks. So I will check that they're identical and that there is something entered in the field. And then we just change the output again. So text equals passwords do not match. We need to remove the while loop here. We don't need any of this anymore. And now we can try it out. So let's try something. Let's just say Sam. And it is a problem because Sam is already in our list of names. If I type Al, the username is too short. So let's go with Albert and 1. We get username cannot contain numbers. So let's just go with Albert. And now for the password, we will create a short one. So we'll say pass. That is no good. So it needs to be 8 characters long. So let's say pass. We need to have a capital letter. So let's put a Q. We need to have a special character. Let's put an exclamation mark. Passwords must contain a number. So we can put a 2. And then the passwords do not match. So I'll just copy and paste this. And here we are. We have a successful sign up. So this is the end of the simple GUI tutorial, and we have a functional program now that visually allows the user to enter a username and password. It performs all the different checks that we had before and adds another one to make sure that the username is adding the same password. And we have a display down here to tell them if there is something wrong. If you wanted to extend this and have it actually do something, you could have a function that is triggered once the sign up is successful. So once we have a successful sign up, we could maybe go to a new window, we could start some sort of program and do anything you want really. This is something that I'm going to leave up to you. We're not going to cover that in this tutorial. Also, if you want to make this look a little bit nicer, you can play around with the different fonts, colors, entry fields. There are all sorts of little configurations here in tkinter that you can mess with, but we're going to leave it as it is for now. If you have enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, check out PyLearning Companion. The link is in the video description. You can also find the source code below.